Yeah, sure. So,
And then,
okay, so if anybody wants to turn their camera on, that's fine. If you don't, that's also fine. I'm waving at you, whether I can see you or not. So, okay, so my name's Emma Rush. I'm a guitarist from Hamilton in Canada, and I guess you've just sort of overheard me chatting about some stuff I've gotten done over the pandemic. And one of those things was that I released a new album of music from the 19th century that is music written for guitar by women. And a large amount of it is basically unknown. Um, and most of it has never been recorded before. Only, I think, 2 out of 17 tracks have been recorded before. So I really went for a very deep dive into this world of music written by women in the 1800s. Um, so basically, I got the idea for this project because I bought a period guitar, like a copy of a 19th century guitar, just because I was talking to the luthier and I got so excited about his guitars that I was like, great, I want one. And then once I had it, I was like, what am I going to do with this? Because I was never playing any romantic music. And so I just sort of started thinking, like, what would be a great project to put this guitar to use? And I sort of eventually developed this idea of trying to just see if there was anything out there from that period that was written by female composers. So I've always tried in my programming to make sure, sort of every concert has a couple of works by women because why not? Why wouldn't we? Um, so I released this CD. It's called Wake the Sigh, which is an Emily Bronte quote. And it's got music from Susan Dommett, who no one knows about, Julia Piston, same, Julie Fondard, same, Emilia Giuliani, Katarina Pratten, Dolores Tagoni, and Angelina Panormo. So I'm going to talk today just about three of these composers, and just sort of give an overview of what they were about and what their music was like, and also something that always fascinates me about historical figures is just sort of trying to put the pieces together from what we know about them to kind of just get a picture of what they actually would be like what were their personalities like, and what were their lives like, to just sort of bring these people to life. That's something that I've always just found really, really interesting about music history. So I'm sure the name Giuliani is familiar to everybody. But what a lot of people don't know is that Mauro Giuliani's daughter, Emilia, was also a very accomplished guitarist and composer herself. So I'm just going to share my screen and pull up, hopefully successfully, pull up an image of Giuliani here. That's not her. Okay, so can everybody see that? Yes.
yes.
Okay, so this is Emilia Giuliani Guglielmi, and this is a charcoal sketch that was done of her in Naples. And she, as I mentioned, she was the daughter of Mauro Giuliani, and she started playing when she was very, very young. And she made her debut alongside her father when she was a teenager. So her first concert was playing in a duo with Mauro Giuliani, which is a pretty amazing way to start your performing career. um, and after that, she went on to be a really successful solo performer. So she was performing throughout Italy and beyond, throughout Europe. And she actually even shared the stage once with Franz Liszt. So they split a concert together. So, she was really, really sort of well respected as a performer. If you read accounts reviews of her performances at the time, they're basically universally saying that her technique was incredible, like just really like explosive technique. She's basically credited with inventing like artificial harmonics. She's the first person we know of that was using those. The only thing we find that's like a little bit negative from these reviews is that some reviewers are like, oh, she's so talented, she's so great, it's just too bad she's wasting her time playing the guitar. So we kind of get the sense that the guitar was not mega popular in Italy at the time. But we'll see. She actually responded to this by doing what a lot of composers at that time did, and playing music based on opera themes, which was all the rage in Italy at the time. Let's get made little notes here. So Emilia married Mr. Guliani, who was a vocal teacher and also a composer. And she followed him to Hungary. They made a move based on his career. And this wasn't a really great move for her. So she wound up, she went there and she played a little bit, but it didn't seem like her performing career was really very active at that point. And she, within a couple of years of moving to Hungary, she actually died. So she died at the age of 37 of a putrid fever, which sounds awful. So let's make sure we don't get that. So she wrote all these works, as I said, inspired by opera. So she wrote a set of 6 Belliniana. And so this is maybe inspired by her father's Rossiniana. She also wrote, a few different sets of themes and variations. And she also wrote this amazing set of 6 preludes, which are really, really good. And they're really technically really complex. And they kind of develop her, like the Arpeggios sort of work that her father did. So I'd like to just play, I've recorded a couple of her pieces, but they're really huge. So I'd like to play just a short piece, one of her preludes that my colleague recorded. So I'm just going to switch to that, possibly successfully. Oh, looks like it. So this is going to be the Canadian guitarist Emily Shaw playing Prelude number 3 by Emilia Giuliani.
So you're muted, Emma.
I imagine that won't be the only time you have to let me know about that. So you can hear, you definitely need some chops to play this music. And all of Emilia Giuliani's music is really quite difficult. for sure. It has that regular 19th century thing where it's you play through it and you're like, oh yeah, this seems pretty good, and then you actually get stuck into it and it's very, very challenging. So a couple other of those preludes have there's another couple that are like really arpeggio intensive. There's one with parallel octaves. It's extremely difficult. So these works are really good, and they're really high level pieces that are absolutely at home on the concert stage. So I would encourage you to check out more of them. What I love about Emilia Giuliani is she must have just been such a determined person. Because I mean, first of all, she's trying to be a musician in this period, right? Which for a female was not really on. Like, unless you're a singer, like you could get away with it if you're a singer, but trying to play any other instrument and be like a professional high level performer and composer was just, next to impossible. So she showed just like so much determination in pursuing this path. Also, she was doing all this with an instrument that no one wanted to listen to, so this also is really interesting because she must have had to fight twice as hard, because it's not just overcoming her gender, but also that she was playing this instrument that people were not very supportive of at the time. And then the third thing is that here she is trying to establish her own career in the shadow of her father, right, who was just this absolutely formidable figure in the guitar world. So she had, three things kind of stacked against her, and she really triumphed over those and had this very, very successful career as a performer, and also left us with a really amazing body of work for the instrument. So that's Emilia. If you have any questions, I think Paul and I had said just like maybe stick them in the chat and Paul will keep track of them, and we'll just like get to them all later, because there's danger that I will just be completely distracted by the question and lose my focus. Okay, so the next person I would like to talk about is Katarina Pratten. So 1 second. Okay, so here is Madame Sydney Pratten, aka Katarina Peltzer, Katarina Pratten. So Katarina Pratten was, she's somebody that some people know about, same as Emilia Giuliani. These are like a couple of the more like familiar figures from this very obscure world of 19th century guitar music written by women. And just kind of as an aside, like I find we have this idea that there's not a lot of music from this time period for the guitar. We're like, oh, there's Giuliani, there's Rigondi, there's Legnani, and Carcassi and Carulli, like that's it. But actually there's so much that people are not playing. Like there's Leonard Schultz, which is amazing, Felix Horetsky, like there's all kinds of stuff out there that I don't think gets quite enough attention. Anyway, so Katarina Pratten is an absolute gem of the Victorian guitar scene. She was just this amazing, amazing figure. So she moved she was born in Germany. She was born Katarina Peltzer. And as a child, she moved to England with her family. And her dad was Ferdinand Peltzer, who he founded and edited the Giuliani, which was the first guitar magazine. So he must have been a cool guy. So he was super active in the guitar scene, and he was Katarina's teacher. And so she started learning when she was very, very young, and hit the stage when she was 8 years old. That was her first concert. And check this out. Here she is. Isn't that adorable? So she She played all over the place when she was really young. And she actually, this is so cool, she played as a little kid, she played in a duo with Rigondi, who was also a little kid. And there's this beautiful story where they were playing a concert together and the audience couldn't see them. So they had to put the kids on top of the piano in the hall so that they would actually be like visible to the audience. And that must have just been so sweet, you know. Um, anyway, so she, as she grew up, she became very well known as a performer. So she didn't travel so much. She was quite centered in England and didn't ever, I think, leave the UK to perform in Europe or anything. But she was very, very well known in England. She wound up marrying Robert Sidney Pratten, who was this killer flute player, and he kind of revolutionized actually like flute construction at the time. Like Pratten style flutes are still produced now, and they were like mega, mega in love. And tragedy struck. He died very young, and she went into mourning. And for the rest of her life, she was like never married again, and was always extremely sad. You can hear in her music that she wrote right after his death, which are some of her more popular pieces. They all have names like sadness, like mourning, forgotten, a lost love, love's lament, like these really sort of melancholy tunes. And they're very sad, but they're also like exquisite, exquisitely beautiful. Um, Along with her composing activities, she also became a teacher. And she was absolutely like the most in demand popular teacher in London at the time. And she was teaching all the who's who of London. In fact, she was even teaching Queen Victoria's kids. So I don't think, like in London, I don't think you get more high society than that, right? Than actually teaching the royal family their guitar lessons. She was totally connected. You can see if you look at like the guest books from different like country homes, stately homes through England at that time, you can see Katarina Pratten visited. Um, she was very connected with other musicians. You can you can see in like the dedications of her pieces. Also, there's things like one of her pieces, which is a duo, she wrote one part, and Augusta Hervé, who was the founder of Britain's first women's mandolin band, wrote the other part. So she was pretty active. And just sort of connected in the scene. And I kind of think the guitar scene basically revolved around her. You can read sort of reminiscences from her students at that time that just talk about how she was just, you know, this happening person who was so generous with her time, such an incredible teacher. As a teacher, she was certainly generous with sharing her knowledge. I mean, she wrote a guitar method. Then she wrote a simplified version of that so that her information would be able to get to everybody a bit easier. She wrote a method for guitar in E major tuning. She wrote tons and tons of stuff for open tuning, which is, I think, quite unusual for that time. Like I haven't seen a lot of other music from that period that really uses alternate tunings like below drop D. So yeah, she made her knowledge like really, really available. With her compositions, I think these are just great. So she wrote all kinds of stuff. She wrote really high level concert works. She wrote let's see, like a collection of music that's inspired by folk songs from around the world. She wrote music inspired by like folklore and folk legend. She wrote all these depressing, beautiful pieces about how sad she was. And and then of course this like huge body of work for E major tuning. And she wrote all the kind of, standard stuff. So you can find like a Hungarian march and a Spanish dance and, these sort of 19th century standard things that everyone would have played. But then these pieces that really, I think, we can really hear her personality in it. And this is something that I just love about her music, because she had a very distinct style, and her personality, when you play her pieces, it just seems to like leap off the page. Like, some things, like if you play Carcassi, I don't think you get a really big sense of who Carcassi was. But when you play Pratten, you just hear these like such a depth of emotion, and it's really wonderful repertoire to get into. Some of it's available in the Boyja collection. Some is in the Huddleston collection. I did a 2-month residency to research this stuff. I was living in Europe for a couple of months, and I wound up going to like the Bodleian in Oxford, which has a huge collection of Pratten scores. And some of them, this is how underappreciated this music is. The librarian helpfully brought me a book, or not a book, a box of uncatalogued works that had been sitting there since 1986. And it's like, it was full of, I don't know, like 200 Pratten scores. And like, everyone's like, oh, well, it's just Pratten, stick it on the shelf. Which is just, blows my mind. But I'm very, very helpful, or very thankful that the librarian was able to share that with me. Okay, so let's listen to a little bit of Pratten. So this will be me playing a piece called Kelpie's Dance. So this is one of the pieces I mentioned that it was inspired by folklore. And a Kelpie is a Scottish mythological creature that is like a scary water horse. And the most famous of all the Kelpies is Nessie, or the Loch Ness Monster. So I'll put this on Kelpie's Dance by Katarina Pratten. Hopefully I will. Let's see what happens. Katarina Pratten, here we go. I think it's all coming together. Not muted. Okay. So you can hear like this piece. It has so much character, right? It sounds really playful. It's got just sort of a definite atmosphere, and you find this with all of Pratten's music. It all just it's really so. Trying to think. I mean, I guess maybe character is just the right word. Um, so she was a really special person, Katarina Pratten. I think it's probably quite difficult to be a child prodigy. And she actually wound up, one of the reasons why she left the stage, it wasn't just because she was really sad, although that was part of it, but she also wound up developing a lot of, oh, bye, Nicholas. She wound up developing a lot of stage fright, so sort of performance anxiety. So um, it's amazing that she was able to sort of transition then into doing this role as London's premier guitar teacher and also an incredible composer. We can see in her music, I'll talk about this a little bit later on as well, she uses all kinds of techniques, basically all the techniques, and then she also kind of invented her own techniques as well. Like, for example, she indicates a lot, instead of playing a chord like this or like this, like EBBIMA, she does a thing where she strikes the strings with her thumb and her index finger at the same time. Right, and she explains this in her method, and we don't see that, I think, or we just don't see also her sort of attention to detail, like explaining all her techniques in many other method books or any other sort of scores. So it's a really, really incredible resource, which you can also find online, by the way. So I'd love to talk right now about Dolores Tagoni. So this is the third person figure of historical interest, fascinating figure from guitar history. And I'll move on after her. So let's get Dolores Tagoni up here. So here she is, Madame Dolores Tagoni. So Dolores Tagoni was just absolutely awesome, I think. She was born in Spain, and we don't know too much about her early life, like how she learned to play guitar, with whom she studied. Like, that is basically unknown. We find her sort of in her late 20s. We start hearing about her playing concerts in Paris, playing throughout Europe. And at that time, she also started publishing music. So we've got a set of 6 waltzes that she published in London around that time. So she wound up marrying, well, she married Signor Tagoni. This was her married name that we first hear about her under, and he was a guitarist as well. And the two of them, not content with just being awesome in Europe, get on a boat and go to New York. And this, I think, is pretty brave at that time, to just decide to, waltz off to the New World and see if a performing career might await you there. So she arrives in New York, and she basically hits the concert stage running and gets incredible reviews. Like, she's just met with such wide acclaim. And we can read contemporary reviews that just say that she was an absolute virtuosic performer, that she was the best guitarist in America at the time. And one of my favorite reviews, this is from a New York performance. So the reviewer is comparing a concert that featured Moretti and Antoine Trinidad Huerta, like some pretty, heavy players in that guitar world, contrasting that concert with one of Dolores Tagoni's. And he wound up coming out in favor of Tagoni's, saying, you just couldn't, basically you couldn't compare the two. And that she was able to play in a way that was at once dramatic and exquisite. and that only she was able to draw the very sound of the human voice out of her instrument. Um, so it just sounds like, she was full of musicality as well as just being, sort of full of technical fireworks. Um, so somewhere along the line, it's kind of unclear where, but Signor Tagoni kind of evaporates, and we find her touring with it was a quite well-known cellist at the time, Charles Knoop, and she wound up marrying him and took his name. And so later in her life, she was just known as Mrs. Knoop. And this is how she published all her later works. It was just under that name, not even her first name, just Mrs. Knoop. So we see with her later works, it's a bit interesting. I think she really knew, I think she was a really savvy businesswoman, because we can see in her earlier works that were published for a European audience a quite different style from the works that were published later for the audience in America. So you can see she's sort of catering to different tastes, and we hear kind of a bit more serious stuff in her early works, and then the stuff later is kind of more fun, more full of life, a bit more sentimental. And then it also draws a lot on sort of Spanish themes. I think she was definitely, just sort of responding to what people wanted to hear. She has a really interesting part in guitar history in America, because the first Martin X-Brace guitar, got a picture of it down here. So here's the X-bracing, and this guitar was built in consultation with Dolores Tagoni, and it was actually called the Tagoni model. And I think this is just amazing. This is like a huge guitar company, and to think this female guitarist was the big influence in designing this. It's just great. And it's one of these things that is just sort of lost from history. This, actually, the Tagoni model from Martin has recently been re-released, so it's not lost anymore. It's found, but there's a lot of things like that in sort of guitar history, where the contributions of female players and female composers have just sort of been overlooked and sort of lost throughout time. I actually find it kind of mirrors how the guitar's contribution to music history in general are overlooked when we talk about it. There were so many firsts, with our sort of plucked stringed instruments, our first printed theme and variations, our first person writing, dynamic instructions in a score. Those were all Buela guys from Spain, and you never ever read about this in the history books. So then we just take it to a new level with the guitar history and just sort of erase what all these women were doing. Anyway, so this was Dolores Tagoni. So let's just check out one of her pieces. So this will be one of her first published pieces. So it's waltz number 1 from her set of 6 waltzes that she published in London before she moved to America. So these pieces, I think they're just lovely. Like the set of 6 waltzes, they're all super beautiful. The very frustrating thing about them is that they are really hard to play and they don't sound like it at all. But they, through the group of 6, like Dolores Tagoni is like very harmonically adventurous. She plays in a lot of keys that are not super guitar friendly. Like there's a lot of flats, and they wind up just being like really really complex to play and but very very worth it. I find also her later pieces are actually easier to play. So I don't know if that also if she was writing for her students or what. So we find this also with Katarina Pratten because she was such a prolific teacher. She wrote so much material that was, written for the people that she was teaching. Although with, Pratten's pieces, even the most simple pieces are using so many different techniques and they're all using, all of the fretboard. She's always using, from the first to the, 17th frets in most of her material. So they're sort of they're a lot of this music is really charming, but it's kind of deceptive in that way, in that it sounds so charming and sounds so simple, but actually you need some chops to pull it off. Okay, so I hope that shone some light on some kind of forgotten composers. There's a bit more interest right now in some of these composers. I know a few people have been playing Emilia Giuliani's music, and I'm hearing more and more Pratten. I don't hear too many people playing Dolores Tagoni, but I think it's just totally worth it, and just worth it just to look into these stories and see what else was happening in this 19th century guitar scene, because it winds up being absolutely fascinating, and there's so much there that we're not playing. And I think this goes sort of for guitar repertoire in general. We tend to stick to the canon and we play a lot of the, sort of standard pieces, and a lot of guitar recitals sound the same. And but in every era, from the Renaissance to now, there's just loads and loads and loads of absolutely awesome guitar music. And it's just so worth it to get into it and just dive in and see what's out there. Even if you're just, putting 20 minutes of sight reading into your day of just sort of exploring new stuff, it's absolutely great. And you'll wind up, finding some things that are just going to make your programming that much more exciting and interesting and meaningful for you and your audience. So I definitely recommend it. So I wound up talking about these ladies a little bit longer than I thought. So Paul, maybe you can give me some advice about my timing here. Mm-hmm. So I had some sort of technical stuff we could do, but if you want, I could just maybe sort of do a quick kind of chat about that, or does everyone want to get their guitars out for a few minutes, or what do you think?
I think we could play a little bit, yeah.
Okay, so does anybody want to turn on their camera and let me see them with a guitar?
Or I can even call people to turn on their cameras, like Miguel or Jaden.
Well, I mean, is that your guitar players? Or is everyone a guitar player?
Everyone here is a guitar player, I believe, too. So.
Okay. Well, I'll just go ahead. I think you guys should turn on your cameras and interact, but if you are feeling shy, that's no problem. Or if you forgot your guitar, that's also no problem. So I basically was just going to do some things where I'll just kind of show a couple of exercises that I think are helpful for this kind of music and sort of 19th century music in general. And okay, and I'll just sort of run through a few things. So one thing that I find comes up over and over and over again in music from this period is needing to play a melody over top of an arpeggio. So like, right? So we need like real control over our A finger. And it also, we see a lot, it happens sort of that we need, that we have a sort of melody with our thumb as well. So working on the sort of finger independence in the right hand is super, super key. So a way I like to work on that is just with like really, really basic arpeggios. Like for example, just P-I-M-A. I'm just going to share my screen again. Okay, so basically, we just play P-I-M-A. One way I practice sort of bringing out different fingers is actually just using that pattern and bringing out a different finger. So for example, like I, M, or A. Right, so just kind of working through a basic pattern. But what I found can be really, really helpful is just actually starting the arpeggio on a different finger. And it just sort of gives you almost the feeling of a whole new arpeggio. So if we just move and start with our next finger, so starting with I. We can move through, so start with M, same pattern. So the fingers are still moving in the same order, but we just rotate where we start. And A. So it means we're just, it's the exact same pattern, but something like when we just start on a different finger, like really mentally shifts and it just becomes kind of a whole new arpeggio. And that can be just like really great to just kind of work on how we're shifting the emphasis from finger to finger. We can do that with all of our sort of like basic arpeggios. So just, you know, P-I-A-M in whatever order in a four note sequence, right? So nothing like a pattern of 6, but we just stay in our patterns of 4. So P-I-A. If we then shift it, like you can hear, it sounds like a totally different arpeggio. We'll shift it again. We'll start from the 3rd note. And start from the 4th. And you can, of course, just change, like, you can just like draw your P-I-A-M out of a hat to figure out the order, but that can be just a great way to sort of rotate through basic arpeggios. I love playing arpeggios just on open strings. So I can kind of really focus on the right hand. Because I know for me, and I see it in a lot of my students, we're like very, very focused on what's happening over here on the fretboard. And so when I'm able to just kind of like eliminate that altogether and just be able to really look at my right hand, really listen to my right hand, I can do some sort of really controlled work with it, which can be really helpful. Another great way just to work on that is to play a solid chord. So just a really balanced chord. I have to do this when I'm feeling like very zen, not stressed out or like chaotic at all. And then just go through and figure out, or not figure out, but just like emphasize one finger in the chord. So listen for the bass voice, right? So if you have your guitar at home, try and do this. Then also fairly easy is bringing out the A finger or soprano voice, right? So you're really having to control your fingers in a really sort of like micro way. Try and bring out M. And let's go for our tenor voice. This is the hardest one for me. So that's also just really, really great. I noticed in a lot of this repertoire, and a lot of like any repertoire, we find a lot of slurs in combinations with shifts. So I know like we play a lot of these exercises. You know, and so on, this kind of slur stuff where we're moving like across the fretboard in this way, across the strings. But something I find a lot of us skip is playing our slurs up and down the fretboard. So I love doing this, also with all like the standard finger combinations, but right. So first of all, it gives you a lot more slurs in a row, so it's a really good workout. But what you can do with this exercise is try every time you shift to let the tension go from your hand. Well, I try not to say tension, but like let the action go from your hand. So we play this and then totally relax on the shift. So we try and build in this feeling of ease every time we shift. And so that when you have this in the repertoire, like right, where we're sort of shifting and slurring at the same time, you sort of already have that feeling. You've practiced sort of shifting and slurring and feeling like you always have this moment to sort of recuperate. And so I do that with 1 and 2. If you got your guitar, let's try 2 and 3. So relaxing in between every slur. We can turn it around as well. And of course, we can just do the same thing. 3 and 4. If you want your butt kicked, you'll find 2 and 4 should do the trick. So I'm screwing it up right now. But that's, I find, like really working on so many slurs with those fingers in a row can be quite tough, and you get a good workout. I like to do that basically with all the fingers. So I do like ascending slurs and descending slurs with 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 1 and 3, 2 and 4, and 1 and 4. And I do it on the first string, the second string, and the third string. So I do that whole sequence up and down each string. And I find that's that really gets your slurs together for sure. I think one of the most important things to think about when you're playing music from this period, like sometimes we think it's boring, right? Like we think Sora is boring, or we think Caruli is boring, but actually it's just people playing it in a boring way. And if you look at, for example, Katarina Pratten's method book, she gives so many instructions about how to use all the different colors of the guitar. We kind of, sometimes we just save this stuff for like, I don't know, like more modern music. That's when we really go super Ponticello or super Dolce. But I think we should apply that pretty much to like repertoire from any period, but definitely in this like classical, post-classic, romantic period repertoire, just absolutely go for it. So I love to, even if I'm just practicing something maybe quite simple, like say just like an A major scale, I love to work on that, you know, over here. Like see what kind of tone I can get from it, and then like do the exact opposite. Right, and then maybe see what kind of crescendo I can build in there. or maybe the opposite. You know, so just take whatever I'm working on and see how much I can push it in terms of the interpretation, and kind of use every technique that's in my fingers to work on the music, to be able to find like the right way to put a lot of character into the music, and to just develop like an interpretation that really expresses my personality and also is really faithful to what's on the page. And I think when you do a lot of like research into the composers that you're playing, like I've done with the composers I talked about today, you really start being able to figure out kind of what their personalities were, and maybe like how they would have sounded, how they would have wanted you to play, and that can be really, really worthwhile. Sort of adds like a whole new depth to when you're working on some repertoire. So I think that was kind of a very like short and compact little technique session, but I think we've only got a couple of minutes. So is there, like, does anybody have any questions about any of this repertoire or these composers, or other, other questions about music from that period, or anything about guitar in general?
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Hi. Sorry. Um, Earlier at the beginning, you said guitar specially made, like a 19th century one. Is there like are there any like specific differences between that and like a modern day, or like what are the specific differences? And then also, like, if you don't mind me asking, like, how much exactly did that cost to have that done?
Yeah. I don't mind you asking at all. So the difference is, I just happen to have a 19th century guitar right here. So the differences basically are that the body is quite a bit smaller. I wonder if I can fit these guys in the screen. So if I put them down, you can see here, like this guy is quite a bit smaller than the modern guitar. The fretboard usually has more frets than we're used to. So this, for example, goes up to high D, whereas my guitar has 20 frets, so it goes up to C, but sometimes we're only, kind of stopping at B. Down here, it's not a tie bar. We've got pegs, so you have to tie a fancy knot in the string, then poke it through, then put the peg in. In this guitar, this is a copy of a Stauffer guitar, so a Viennese guitar. So it's got this, he was very inspired by cello construction. So explains the shape of the headstock. But one thing that was quite common for these guitars, and some other makers from that time period, is the neck actually comes off. So there's a bolt here where I can, I've got like a fancy key somewhere, where I can just sort of unscrew this and the neck will come right off, which it's quite handy because if you just sort of change it a little bit, you can change the action on the guitar. So if you're like, oh, my guitar is too quiet today, just like crank up the action. If you're like, oh, I'm so lazy, this is too hard to play, just like, turn it in the other way and it'll be like easier to play that day. You can see like it's basically got a raised fretboard. So everyone thinks raised fretboards are like this, innovation that happened around 20 years ago, but actually Stauffer was, cranking out these raised fretboard guitars back in, 1850. So the woods were also a bit different. This one is just made from maple. You can see like the back and sides are maple. The top is spruce. And then the fretboard isn't ebony. It's something else, which I can't remember, but it's been what they call ebonized. So basically it was a process to turn wood dark so it would look like ebony. And that was very common at the time. Like this guitar was made by Miodrag Zerdoner, who's a Canadian luthier in Quebec. And he did just like so much research to figure out like all these sort of contemporary ways to build guitars, so that he can be as faithful as possible to historic building techniques. And then his guitars, these ones are about $4,000, I think. And usually like a period instrument copy, so that was like 4,000 Canadian bucks. So it's more like 3,000 US dollars. And they're probably like in the 3 to 5 range. And you might be able to find some cheaper, but that's about right. So they wind up not being usually as expensive as like a high-end like modern style guitar. So I think that's quite great because they're pretty affordable. And if you are looking for an actual guitar from that time period, it winds up being about the same price. So you can find them. You can find like real guitars that were built in the 1800s. And I kind of don't know why more people don't buy them. Like I'm gonna buy one for sure. I've started looking for one because I think that's just awesome. You know, that they still exist, and to be able to have a kind of piece of history like that. For me, that's great. If you're playing that kind of music, why not be able to play a historic instrument?
Oh, oh no, wow, that was just, thank you. That was like really cool.
Yeah, sure. Are there any, does anybody else have a question? Come on.
Well, I guess while you were researching like the female composers, did you notice much difference in like their composing styles compared to like all the male composers that we know?
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess not, because I mean, first with some like Katarina Pratten, for example, like she just had really her own like style that was so distinct. We really hear like with Emilia Giuliani that she like her music was super advanced. So you can hear that she was writing later than Mauro Giuliani, right? Like she's starting to do different harmonic things. She's starting to approach the instrument in different ways. But I think there was also some composers that I was looking at that, some that maybe only wrote a couple pieces, some that were like primarily teachers, but everybody I found was writing like really good, competent music, you know, in the style of that time period. But I didn't notice anything like a super feminine sound or anything, or any kind of distinct thing that these people were writing in. And also I think they were so few and far between, that it's not like you know, they had a club where they would compose together or anything. It was, you know, someone was in England, someone was in Italy, someone had gone to New York, someone was in Paris. So they were all sort of like islands, sort of forging these like careers on their own, basically with no other role models. You know, it was just, I think, just so fascinating that they were able to sort of have the gumption to do this. Was there something in the chat maybe?
Yeah.
Oh, where would be the best place to buy a period guitar? Somebody that I know who constantly has period guitars, his name is David Jacques. I'll just write this down. David Jacques. So he is in the French part of Canada, and he's, as far as I can tell, kind of for like all over the world, he's the guy to deal with. He just is constantly tracking down these period instruments. And if you Google him, or Google like David Jacques like guitar collection, you can find out what he's got for sale. And it's amazing. Like, just go to the website and have a look, whether you want to buy a guitar or not. You'll be able to see all these examples of these fabulous guitars from the 19th century. But I think that's a really easy way just to like find a bunch of guitars, you know, that are for sale and restored and playable. But I guess aside from that, like, you can find them at auction houses, you can find them in antique shops. I sometimes just sort of cruise through like eBay and sort of see what's available. But yeah, I would recommend just sort of starting with David Jacques. That's a great spot. Anything else?
How do you go about like choosing different color and timbre changes when working on a piece?
Yeah, I basically just try everything. So I mean, sometimes it's just kind of instinct, you know, like I've played a lot of music from that period. Well, I just played a lot of music, period. So I kind of know my style and what I want to do. But I try everything. And what like some I got some advice actually when I was a student years ago that was um basically every passage you're playing, push it in every direction as far as you can, right? Like play it mega staccato, mega legato, super angry, super romantic, like in every kind of direction. And then you find like, then you kind of rein it in and figure out what's like a appropriate, you know, level to play it at and what is going to really work for the music and what's going to work for you. Like there's some things, of course, like um, everything is kind of needs to be a little bit appropriate to the period, you know, like we have sort of performance practice for every era. But I think for me, it's even with stuff like if I'm playing Baroque music, you know, I play like wildly ponticello passages and then just kind of gives me ideas like, okay, like maybe this kind of more brighter sound is gonna work for this passage. But basically just like try everything. And then it's great for your technique, it's great for your musicality, and it just like you often find out sort of things about the music that you didn't realize. So it's a great way to just kind of explore your repertoire and explore your technique. Um, so Mariah just asked like how often I play with this little guitar. And the answer is not much so far because I released this record that I was going to, you know, do a tour to support um, in the middle of the pandemic. So I've done no touring at all to support it. But I hope once things open up, I'm hoping to play a lot of this repertoire. So I'll be playing a lot of concerts with the little guitar. I also I play a lot of modern music written by female composers as well. So I'm thinking of doing a program where I do the first half with historical pieces on the period guitar, and then do the second half of the concerts with a modern guitar and some more contemporary music. Anything else? Don't be shy. I'm here. You can see I love to chat.
I guess with like the more traditional pieces, would you push those in every direction as well? Or would you try and, I guess, keep to tradition, so to speak?
Oh, okay. So yeah, I push them in every direction in the practice room while I'm working on my interpretation, and then I kind of just like reel it in. So if it's you know, some things it's just gonna sound too crazy if you're playing like, you know, wildly staccato passages or something. But I just feel like if I try something really staccato and then I'm like, oh, hang on a second, like these notes maybe work. And then maybe for the type of repertoire it is, it's going to be like kind of a lightly detached effect that happens at the end. But because I kind of have, you know, jumped into it from every angle, it sort of, the music sort of reveals different things, I think. But even just, I don't know if you've ever heard Pavel Streidel play. So it's a Czech guitarist who he plays a lot of this like romantic period music. And he's just one of the most engaging interpreters of it. But it's because he's just totally pushing it. Like he's really going for it in terms of like all of the colors of the guitar are present. All of the gestures are really big. You know, he does when he wants to do something a bit dark, he really goes there. When he wants it to be playful, it's really there. Like it's just like the music really comes to life. So I think we tend to be a little bit like too reserved sometimes. Um, and as like we all know, like we're kind of short on volume with this instrument, but we are very long on color, right? So why not just go for it and use like all the colors we have and you know, use that to draw everybody into our sort of concert world, into our, you know, musical world that we're creating, since we're not able to like blast the notes out at everybody else. That's kind of, you know, the whole magic of the guitar is we have like just this incredible tone that we're able to control in so many different directions. Anything else?
And I guess my last question it would be I guess like practicing phrasing with your left and right hand. Would you like do it together or would you separate them out?
I think for practicing phrasing, I'm usually using both my hands for sure. But I do like, I mean, all the time, if I have some sort of difficult right hand stuff, I definitely practice right hand alone. I don't do as much left hand alone, but for practicing phrasing, I think it's almost, for me, it's almost more of like a hands-free exercise. Like what I do the most to really work on that is like sing the passages. And then I feel like I'm just really like internalizing the music. And I'm not a very good singer, but I just kind of like pretend like I'm an opera singer and just like go for it. And then you just really feel like the flow of the music so much better and the phrasing becomes so much more natural. Because I know I hear with a lot of guitarists, like just because we don't actually have to breathe, right? We can wind up playing a phrase for 2 hours if we feel like it. But if we just sort of work on sort of imitating the voice or imitate, like pretend we're playing a woodwind instrument, all of a sudden, like the time we need between phrases becomes more apparent. The way we need to sort of approach and support higher notes becomes more apparent. So the best thing I think for working on phrasing is just to sing, sing, sing. And then once you've got that idea in your head, like when you've got the line you want, then you have to find a way to make your fingers do it, right? And that's basically what technique is, right? So all technique is just finding a way for our hands to get the idea in our head to be realized. Anything else? Okay. Well, I really had a really nice time talking with all of you today, and I hope I have inspired you a little bit to check out some unusual repertoire, whether it's the catalog of, you know, music written by women from the 19th century or other times, or whether it's the huge amount of music by BIPOC composers that we are not exploring, or whether it's just like the unusual pieces from the usual composers. All of those things are ways to really sort of enhance your repertoire, enhance your technique, and enhance your enjoyment of playing the instrument. So yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you very much for your time, Emma. It was really good information. Yes, I enjoyed it because I'm looking at some Pratten music right now, and
Oh, great.
yes, so it was very informative.
Good.
Yes.
Good. And all of you, you know, if anything comes up later, if something pops into mind that you want to know about this repertoire or these women, you know, I'm easy to find. You can contact me through my website. I'll also be releasing some videos of this stuff like over the next couple of months. So, you know, that's me on YouTube. You can find it there. Great. Okay, well, I'll say good night to you guys. And thank you so much for tuning in tonight, and looking forward to the next time.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.